Today, I'm going to be preaching. I'm going to take us kind of out of our series that Pastor Kurt's been preaching on, but I'm going to take us to the book of James. So you guys can go ahead and turn with me to the book of James. We'll be in James chapter 4 today. And as you guys are turning there, I just want to kind of set things up for us today. And I'm going to pick a little bit on Craig this morning. I didn't prep you for this, but you gave me the thumbs up, so it's all good. But I want to talk a little bit about physical therapy. How many of you guys out there have ever gone through some sort of physical therapy? There we go. Whether that's because we've injured ourselves, whether that's because maybe we had a surgery, something like that nature has caused us to need physical therapy. And I want to talk about that a little today because I feel it kind of ties in with a little bit what James is talking about. See, physical therapy, the main goal of the physical therapist is to, whether it's a bone, whether it's a muscle, ligament, tendon, whatever, we've hurt it, we've damaged it, and their job is to get us back to that use, to that mobility of whatever we've hurt as close to 100% as we can get it. And by doing that, they have us do what's called these exercises. I don't know if you're like me, and I'm sure if you've ever had Craig as your physical therapist, this hasn't been the case, but for me, some of these exercises that they told me to do, I consider them more of like torturous activities. It just hurts. You're like, do this and this will make it feel better. I'm like, this hurts so bad. You have that little tear running down your eye, and they're like, you can do it, you're doing good, and this hurts so bad. And then if that's not enough, they're like, since we had so much fun making you cry today, I want you to also do this at home. Right? But then when they told me to do that, I would conveniently forget that I had to do those at home, and I wouldn't do them at home because they were uncomfortable. I had other things going on, and I just didn't want to do them. Even though I knew, because the physical therapist told me to, I knew that it would make my injury heal faster. It would be good for my body, but I didn't want to do them because they hurt. They were uncomfortable. I didn't want to deal with it at home. I didn't want to deal with it at his office. I didn't want to deal with it at home, so I wouldn't do them. And I tell you this because as we approach the text in James chapter 4, verses 1 through 10, he's talking about dealing with sin in our life. And I feel sometimes just as when we're hurt and we're going through physical therapy and they tell us to do these exercises, we tend to not do them because why? They're uncomfortable. They hurt. We don't want to do them. They're inconvenient. And sometimes when we have sin in our life, we don't always like to deal with it because it's uncomfortable. It hurts. It's awkward. It's not convenient. But James is going to bring that to our attention today. So if you would follow along with me, I'm going to read out of James chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. It says, "What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war with you? You desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend with the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose that it's to no purpose that the scripture says he yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made dwell in us? But he gives more grace. Therefore, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wrecked and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you." There's a lot in here, and it's packed full. If you've ever gone through the book of James, James is really good at addressing an issue and showing how big of an issue it is, but then he doesn't leave us there. He brings us to a conclusion. So I want to walk through that process with you this morning. And it's a very applicable passage. First of all, he talks about fights. He talks about quarreling. And what does he say is the cause of fighting and quarreling in verse 1? What does he say is the reason for that. The desires, yeah. He says they're at war with each other. He says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? It is that your passions are at war with you. They're at war with you. And I've brought this little rocking chair to kind of illustrate this, and just bear with me for a little bit. This is a rocking chair. We have 3 of these at home for each one of our kids. My mom has this elderly friend who's in a nursing home, and to pass his time, he makes these rocking chairs, handmade rocking chairs. They're really nice. They're actually really heavy. You can't tell because I make it look so easy, but they're solid wood. Don't laugh at that. Wasn't a joke. Ouch. But they're great, but he makes them all the same. Even though they're handmade, he's very good at it, and they all look the same. And we have 3 identical rocking chairs at home. So you would think all of our kids would be happy because they each have their own. But guess which rocking chair is their favorite rocking chair? The one that brother and sister is sitting in. It doesn't matter if the other 2 are vacant. They want the one that brother or sister is sitting on because for some reason, they want it. See, they don't want the rocking chair because it's a better rocking chair. They're the exact same color, exact same style. They rock the same. They're in the same room, the house. What drives them to fight, what drives them to quarrel over a rocking chair is not the quality of it, but rather the jealousy that they have of their other sibling getting it. And I think this is what James is starting to try to get us to realize. He's saying sometimes we fight, we quarrel amongst ourselves in the church, not because of, worshiping God. We worship the same God. He's saying we don't fight, we don't argue with each other because we want to serve and fulfill the Great Commission. We all want to do that. Rather, he's saying, let's look a little bit inside of us. Is there a jealousy? Are our passions colliding? Not because of necessarily what the other person's doing, but because of something inside of us. That word that he uses in verse 1, he uses this word passions. And the Greek word for that is hedonai. And the idea of this word is, it describes just this passion or this desire that we have. And he uses that because it's an inner sense. It's a strong use of that word. And the interesting part about this word is that hedonai is kind of where we get our English word hedonism. Hedonism. And if you know what hedonism is, it's a worldview, it's a philosophical thought of where you want as much pleasure, you deserve the most pleasure as you can get, but you want to remove as much pain as you can take. So you want all the good stuff, but you don't want any of the bad stuff, right? We see that in our culture all the time. We see look at marketing. You can get all of this stuff and you don't have to work very hard because it's on sale, right? JCPenney's, it's always on sale. You can afford everything you want, right? Because they always have sales. We look at, at cars, you can get this car because it's going to be great for you and you just have to make these little payments a month for the rest of your life, but it'll be great. We have this desire, we have this want, we have this hedonism that we want the best, but we don't want any of the bad stuff to come with it. And James is saying is sometimes when we're fighting, sometimes when we have that tug in us, is that really an issue that the other person is causing? Or is that our hedonism inside of us kicking in? Is that an inner jealousy, an inner desire kicking in? Because what James is going to be walking us through is talking about when we have this sin in our life, if we don't deal with it, it's going to produce this fruit of arguing, of quarreling. And he's going to walk through that with us. And I want us to kind of look at verse 2 because he starts kind of this thought process, this list. He says, you desire and you don't have, so you murder. Okay, so I'm not bringing this message to you today because I am fearful that someone's going to kill each other. We're not going to start killing each other. That's not why I'm talking about this. James uses some pretty intensive language because he wants to get the message across. But I think it's important for us to realize that as we're reading this section, as we're reading the letter of James, in this particular instance, James is not referencing a certain church, and he's not referencing a specific issue. And I think this is important because, if we're thinking, oh, wow, James is really talking to one messed up church, if they're just arguing and then they're starting to kill each other, at least we're not like them. But here's what James is doing, because he knows that fighting, that arguing isn't a specific church problem. He knows that that's not a certain time-sensitive issue. He knows that this is going to span wherever two or more are gathered, there's going to be some arguing. There's going to be some fighting. And he's wanting to address this issue when it's small, when it gets out of control, before things escalate. So he's taking us to the worst possible situation. He's saying if you start, if you're desiring and you let that desire keep growing and growing, it's going to turn into something ugly. Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount kind of alludes to that. He's saying, even if you hate your brother, if you have hate in your heart, he's saying it's like you're murdering. James is playing off on that, and he's saying, if there's a desire, if there's a sin in your life that you're not dealing with, that you're not keeping in check, he's saying, where is your heart taking you? Where is your thoughts? Where are you at? Is it loving your brother, or is it really hating them? Is it being angry with them? So he says, you desire, you can't have, so you murder. And then he moves on. He says, you covet, you can't obtain, so you fight and quarrel. Again, he's taking this to the furthest degree. He's saying, if you want something that you either can't have or something to the amount that you can't obtain, to the point where you are no longer content with what you have, or you're jealous of what someone else has. It's like my kids with the rocking chair. They have a fine rocking chair. They could have two different rocking chairs, but they want the one that brother is sitting in because they are not content with what they have. They covet, they fight. And there are some, I don't know if any of you have played King of the Hill when you were little, but it's like that with our rocking chair. We'll get like one little kid on it, and then they'll curl up in a ball and just kind of like attach themselves any way possible to the rocking chair as the other two like try to claw them off of it. But it's this idea of like, we want this. We're going to fight tooth and nail until we get it. And James is saying, wait a minute, check your motive. Check, are you content with what God has given you? Are you content with what you have, of what God has placed in your care? He's saying, if not, it's going to cause fighting. And he's warning us about that again, because he's saying he sees this popping up in the church. He's writing this letter to the church to warn us, to guide us, to direct us against these things. And he's saying, let's not be divided in our church. Let's not show a bad example to the unbelievers by stooping to fighting, to stooping to arguing. He's saying, let's resolve this before it even starts. And then he goes on in verse 3, he says, you ask and you don't receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your own passions. He's just continuing this thought. He's saying, you don't have this because you're selfish. You don't have this because it's not in God's will. It's not because God doesn't love you. It's not because God doesn't want the best for you, but he's saying, you don't need this. You don't need that. What I have provided for you, you can use. I know that. He created you. So he walks us down this list, and then finally he gets to kind of the jaw dropper. And I think this is a shock factor that James is using. In verse 4, he says, you adulterous people. And when I was reading this, I was like, okay, James, we've crossed a line now. Okay, I'm with you as you're talking, if I have hate in my heart, it's like murder. Okay, I get that. I see, if I'm not content with what I have, I can see fighting. I get that. I get how sometimes I ask and it's selfish. But whoa, James, slow up. It says, you adulterous people. And I think he's going for the shock factor because until this point, he's kind of talking about how our relationship between one another is. He's talking about fights amongst each other. And it's, it's still important. But then he hits home. He hits very personal, because no longer is he talking about a horizontal relationship. He's talking about a vertical relationship. He's talking about us with sin in our life and how that affects our relationship with God. He's talking about how we, in our life, how if we allow sin to be undealt with, how that affects our relationship with God. And he uses some very strong language for that. And as I was reading this, it did shock me. I was like, James, where are you going with this, dude? But then I got to thinking, in youth group, dodgeball is kind of a big game for us. And sometimes we'll do a dodgeball game that's called like a free-for-all dodgeball, where there's no teams. You're just on your own, hence free for all. But it's always interesting for me to watch and normally it tends to be guys who do this. I don't know if the girls have already figured this out, or I don't know what it is, but there'll be like a group of 3 or 4 guys. And I'll say, all right, it's free for all dodgeball. The last person in wins. And then I'll see these guys kind of like do one of these, kind of like slowly, like I'm not watching them. They kind of like go over and go to one of their buddies like, hey, do you want to have a truce? Do you want to be on a team? Yeah. And it works really well, They get a few people out. But then it's always really interesting for me to watch is that little group of friends are the last people in. And then they're like on opposite sides of the fellowship hall, and then they finally realize, oh, I can't win unless I get the person, my friend, who I said I wouldn't get out. I have to get him out, otherwise I'm not going to win. And then there's this like thought process, and they're all just kind of like stuck in this like, I'm going to throw it, but I said I wouldn't get him out. And I think about this because sometimes we like to do that with the world. Sometimes we like to say, hey, I'd like to be part of this. I'd like to have this pleasure in the world. I'd like to, not deal with this sin. But then the final conclusion, when we are faced with God and his rule and his justice, we have to say, we either got to let go of the earth, let go of the pleasures that we have on earth and turn to God, or we're going to stick with our pleasures. Just like those guys in dodgeball, they're either going to get out because someone else is going to figure that out before them, or they're going to get them out because they realize in order to finish and win that game, something's got to give. They have to give up a friendship because the friendship that they created isn't a lasting one. It's not a right one. And that is what James is warning us. He's saying these fights, these arguments that sometimes we have in the church, he's saying sometimes it's not about worshiping God. Sometimes it's, what do we really want? What are some of the things that we're holding on to? What friendships do we have that aren't necessarily moving towards the goal of honoring and worshiping God? He does that by saying, you adulterous people, friendship with the world is enmity with God. If you're friends with the world, you're going to be butting heads with God. It's no surprise that, if we're living in sin, if we're trying to go without dealing with sin, that it's going to be hard to read our Bibles, that it's going to be hard to pray, that it's going to be hard to go to church. We're not going to wake up wanting to go to church. Why? Because we're distant from God, because there's sin we're not dealing with. It's like when you go to physical therapy and, they've had those exercises you're supposed to do, or you go to the dentist and then they ask that famous question, do you floss? You have this like, okay, do I tell a lie? Did I actually floss? I flossed like once in 6 months. Can I still say yes? Is that technically a lie? But Craig, how many people do you have come back that say they have done their exercises at home? How much of a percent would you throw out? 50, okay. From that 50%, how many do you believe are actually telling the truth? 10, okay, good. That's good. All of the people here are probably the ones that tell the truth. They're right on their exercises. Right, yep. Mm-hmm. I knew it. But what James is warning us, he's saying, when we have this sin that's undealt with, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's painful, if we're not doing it, we're going to have a harder time. We're going to be at war with God. I know when I had to go through physical therapy, I had those exercises, and I was definitely one of those people that's like did them like as soon as I got home, and then that was the last time I did them throughout the rest of the week. But when I went to physical therapy the next week, I'd be like, oh yeah, I did my exercise. I did a singular one. But each time, and my physical therapist kept reminding me that she's like, well, honey, if you would do these throughout the week, that it wouldn't hurt so bad when you come here. And she was just so upbeat about it. I'm like, but it hurts so bad, and I'm lying. God says, the sin that we have in our hearts, the sin that we have in our life, he knows we have it. But he's saying, deal with it. He's saying, I sent my son Jesus to come die on the cross so it doesn't condemn you. It doesn't count you out. Deal with that sin so you can come to me. If we don't deal with that sin, it's harder and harder to come to God. He says, deal with it. Then look with me in verses, as we finish 4 and 5, he continues to talk about that he extends grace, that he is jealous for us, that he wants us to come to him. He wants that relationship with us. But if we don't deal with that sin, it will cause an issue between us and God. And so James is showing us, is revealing to us the seriousness of our sin, is showing us the danger of what we have happening if we don't deal with sin. But the nice thing about James is he'll do this and he'll get us feeling about this tall, but then he gives us a solution. He doesn't just show us the problem, he gives us a solution. And I want to look at the solution today. This is in verse 7. He says, submit yourself therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Here's what I love, is this idea of he's saying, submit yourself, humble yourself to God. And I think pride makes it so hard for us to deal with our sin. Pride makes it hard for us to say, we're wrong. Pride makes it hard for us to say, I've messed up. And he's saying, when you humble yourself, that's when you can let it happen. I know I don't like going to the doctor. Adrian's nodding her head. I hate going to the doctor. And the same is true with physical therapy. It has to be really bad for me to go see someone. But when I go, I kind of have to swallow my pride, because I like to say, oh, it's just a cough. It'll go away in a little bit. Oh, it just hurts for a little bit. It'll go away. But when it gets to the point where I can't take it anymore, I have to go in, and I kind of have to humble myself and say, you know what, I can't do this on my own. It's not going away on my own. I need your help. I need your expertise. And I need to go in so they can actually help me. They can help me heal. And the same is true with God. He's saying, you're sick. You guys are sick. You have this sickness called sin. And you can't cure yourself. He's saying, I sent the cure. I sent Jesus to die on the cross to make you well again. But you trying to avoid the symptoms, to prolong the inevitable, he's saying, just turn to Christ. Humble yourself. Submit yourself to Christ, to his death, to his resurrection, to the grace that he's extending us. And in doing so, James says, look at what happens. He's saying the devil, the cause of our sin, the cause of the temptation, the cause of our pride, he's saying, when you submit yourself to God, the devil will run. The devil will flee. He's saying the devil only has as much power as we allow him to have in convicting us. Because of Christ's death, we stand forgiven, we stand free, but sometimes we forget that. Sometimes pride likes to help us not acknowledge that, but he's saying, humble yourself, come before Christ. Come get the medicine, come get the antidote that is being given to you. Submit yourself. And I think, and again, I haven't been to that many physical therapy sessions, but the 2 that I've been to have just been so memorable. I will say this was when I was younger, so it wasn't any physical therapists here in Spencer, but I had one of those really just really excited cheerleader type physical therapists where you walk in and you just know it's going to hurt, but she's like, all right, let's do this. This is going to be great. This is going to be fun. And you're just you start getting excited, but then you start doing it and you realize it doesn't matter how much fun she thinks this is going to be. This hurts me and it doesn't hurt her. So she can be excited all she wants, but this still hurts. But I was in 4th grade and I had a shoulder and spine issue, and I was going in for this. And in school, we were in a unit about electricity. So I had this going in, and I go to my first physical therapy session, and she comes in bubbly and happy and all cheerleader-like, and she's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hook you up to this machine. And I was like, okay, cool, machines are cool. And then she's like, and then we're going to put these stickers on you. I'm like, well, I like stickers. I'm up for this so far. And then she says, and then we're going to turn this machine on, and it's going to send electrical pulses through your body. And I'm like, wait, this doesn't sound fun anymore. I just have been learning in school that electrocution and electricity running through my body isn't always super great. And you're saying this is what you want to do to make me feel better? And she's like, yeah, this will be great. And obviously she knew what she was doing, but it took a little bit of convincing for me to like be hooked up to this jumper cable sticker thing. But I did. And I survived. She knew what she was doing, but it took a little humbling and a little convincing myself to submit myself to the care of her when all that was going through my head is like, I'm going to the electric chair right now. But I submitted myself, and it helped me. Sometimes when God is confronting a sin in our life, sometimes when God is saying, hey, let me help you, sometimes we like to say, wait, God, time out. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't fit into my plan. That doesn't sound like it's going to work to me. What if we do this? I would have much rather her say, hey, we're going to give you a nice half-hour-long deep tissue massage. I would have been like, all right, I like this physical therapy. But when she says, hey, we're going to send these electrical shocks through your body, I'm like, what? But sometimes God, in his infinite wisdom and grace and love, he's saying, I'm going to help you this way. This is going to fix this. But sometimes we're hesitant. We say, wait, can't we do something else? Are you sure, God? Maybe it's not that bad, God. We're just going to, I can deal with this. And he says, no, come on. Let's fix this. Come to me. Submit yourself to me. And I love the language that's being used in verse 9. Look at verse 9 with me. He says, be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, and let your joy turn into gloom. He's using kind of the language that the prophets of the Old Testament would be using to speak about, to instruct people who were going through judgment because of their sin. He's looking back to the Old Testament and saying, those people who were going through judgment because of their sin, because they wouldn't submit, because they wouldn't turn back to God, he's saying this is the same language that they would use. And he's using it for us. He's saying we might not be experiencing God's judgment, but we're at the starting point of this. When that sin is left undealt with, he's saying you are on a very slippery slope right now. He's saying humble yourself. Don't think it's okay. Don't take joy in your sin. Don't write it off. He's saying deal with it. Deal with the sin in your life. And deal with it quickly. And deal with it by coming to God. And so I would encourage us today as we think about this, as we even think about the roof that's leaking. When big decisions are to be made, that's sometimes when the biggest emotions flare up. But as believers, as a body, as a family, James warns us, let's deal with the sin inside our life before we come into a community. Let's deal with our vertical relationship between us and God. Let's deal with the sin there. And he's saying, when this happens, when you deal with this sin, when the body of Christ deals with sin in their life as in a corporate manner, he says there is amazing results. There is growth. There is family in that. And I've seen that. I'm on Facebook, and sometimes Facebook likes to show like past events, and it'll show, a year ago this happened today, or 4 years ago this happened. And the other day, Facebook reminded me that I was offered and accepted this job 3 years ago. And Sally's remark is like, I've been suffering for that long. And I said, you're just lucky for 3 years. But in being here, coming up on 3 years, I am humbled and I am grateful to see just within my short time here, the issues that our church has had that have been dealt with well, that we have come together instead of being torn apart. And I think from what I've seen, we've gone through some hard times. And I know we've gone through harder times before I came here, but just what I've experienced, I've been so encouraged as I've been reading through James's warning. I've been encouraged that I feel overall we as a body have done this. We have come together not to tear each other down, not to cause more issues, but we say, hey, we want to follow God, we want to honor God, and we want to reach others for God. Let's figure out, let's put our differences aside. Let's put our different priorities aside, and let's focus on the Great Commission. And I commend you guys for that. That's really cool for me to see. It's really powerful for me to see as I look to people who are older than me, setting that example for me. And I want us to continue to do that. This is what James is doing, isn't giving us a remedy that's going to fix everything and then never have that issue again. Sin is always going to be there, unfortunately, until Christ comes back and takes us home. This is going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue, and James is telling us, let's keep dealing with it, and let's not let sin become a bigger issue than it needs to be. Let's deal with it right away. Let's deal with it. Let's not let it get to murder. Let's not let it get to fighting. Let's not let it get to the point where God is not answering any of our prayers because we're not asking the right things. He's saying, let's deal with it. Let's build our body up. Let's build our family up into a sweet community that God has intended for us. So as I come back to the idea of physical therapy, and I really hope, and I'm kind of scared now if I ever have to go to physical therapy, if what's going to happen to me after that. Maybe I'll have a lot more lesson illustrations from that, but let's hope that doesn't happen. But we trust physical therapists. We trust doctors most of the time to make us better. But what James is asking you, are we trusting God to make us better? Do we trust God just as we would trust a physical therapist with our lives, with our sin? Do we trust God enough to work with us, to deal with us, to help us, to cure us from that? Because sometimes, to be honest, I'll trust what a doctor says, but when I read the Bible, and I'm going through something hard, I'm going through a suffering, I'm going through an issue, sometimes it's really hard for me to take what God says at face value and apply it to my life. Sometimes it's easier for a doctor to give us a pill, but God just doesn't give us a little Jesus pill that makes everything better. It's a continuation of a process, a continuation of our walk with God. And it's hard because it's an everyday thing. It's not just a one-day fix. It's something you have to keep doing over and over and over again. And if we stop, then we start getting sick. We start backsliding. So James is encouraging us. Keep on humbling yourself. Keep on dealing with that sin in your life. Let not it come between you and other people. Let it not affect your relationship with God. Deal with that sin. Allow God to heal you just as you would a doctor or a physical therapist. So I'm going to invite Brenda and Jeremy back up. Let me just pray for us. Dear Father God, thank you just for your words of wisdom. Thank you for the apostles and the prophets to give us your word. And God, I just pray today, God, if there's sin that we have a hard time dealing with, God, I just ask that you help us deal with that. Lord, I just ask over the body of First Baptist Church, Lord, that we'd have a sweet family, a sweet community. Lord, that our relationships with each other would reflect our relationship with you, that we would be a light in our community to show how great, how wonderful, how loving you are. And God, I just ask as we go out from here today, Lord, I just ask your blessing upon everyone. Lord, let us seek you more and more every day. In Jesus' name, amen.